So last year, I made a video covering one of my favorite Game Boy Advance games, Castlevania, Aria of Sorrow. And nobody watched it because it wasn't about Pokemon or wacky fan games. So with that in mind, what better topic could I choose to talk about today than that game's sequel, Castlevania, Dawn of Sorrow? Even if nobody watches this one too, I could always just spend the next video reacting to obviously fake Pokemon leaks. Are these the new starter Pokemon? Clearly not. But it looks good in a thumbnail, so get ready for me to beat around the bush for 10 to 15 minutes. Dawn of Sorrow begins with a brief recap of Aria of Sorrow, reminding us that the protagonist, Soma Cruz, is the reincarnation of Count Dracula, and that this game takes place in the future. It's been an entire year since the events of the last game, and we find our hero, along with his friend Mina, spending a normal afternoon together. But suddenly, a mysterious woman appears, and declares that she is here to kill Soma. She summons demons to attack, and upon defeating them, Soma realizes that he still has the power to control their souls. Genya Arikado tells the pair that the woman is the leader of a dangerous cult, who is intent on reviving the Dark Lord. Since Soma rejected that title, she targeted him, wanting to release Dracula's soul by ending his life. Arikado tells Soma to stay out of it, and to let him and his colleagues take care of the group. But, because Soma is a Japanese high school student with superpowers, you can probably guess how well he listens to that idea. Fearing for the safety of those close to him, Soma heads to where the cult's base is located, and storms in there to take care of them himself. And it's here that the game begins. Like every other great Castlevania game, the first area always has a great tune to get you pumped for killing monsters and demons. This game was also my introduction to the Metroidvania genre, and was what got me immediately hooked on the series. It has a huge map full of different areas to explore, and a wide variety of enemies to encounter, a whole lot more than the previous game did. And speaking of which, the soul system from Aria of Sorrow also returns. You've got your red bullet souls, which let you hurl projectiles, blue guardian souls, which let you do all kinds of special moves, transformations, and even summon familiars, and then there's the yellow enchant souls, which act as a passive ability. Every single enemy in the game is capable of dropping a soul, so there's all kinds of room to experiment with different combinations. As well, it gives the game a lot more replayability. Unless you intentionally grind for specific souls, you're likely to end up with different sets of them over the course of multiple playthroughs. Aside from the fact that there are all kinds of new souls to collect this time, there isn't really any changes to this mechanic compared to the last game. But hey, if it ain't broken, don't fix it, I guess. Now, if only they applied that same logic to the artwork for this game. I'm sure some of you are probably wondering at this point, what is up with this anime art style? I mean, I don't think it necessarily looks bad, but when you compare it to what was in the last game, it seems like a pretty drastic change. According to Koji Igarashi, this change with the art was done so in order to also appeal to a younger demographic. Yeah, because when you've got a game with hanging bodies, blood splattered around, and giants with half their face melted off, you gotta make sure you have something in there for the kids. It really is a shame though, as I really like Ayami Kojima's artwork, and think it suits Castlevania's elements of gothic horror very well. Unfortunately, this change with the art would continue in the next Castlevania on the DS, Portrait of Ruin. It wouldn't be until Order of Ecclesia that they would change the style again. Anyways, enough about that, let's get back to the story. Shortly after arriving to the village, Soma encounters some familiar faces, Yoko and Julius. In the last video, I kind of just didn't mention Julius at all, and people got mad at me. He is the current member of the Belmont family that wields the whip, Vampire Killer. Although he is friends with Soma, he has sworn to defeat him should Dracula's power ever emerge and take control. After Julius jumps off into the castle, we're left with Yoko to teach us about an important new gameplay mechanic: magic seals. I really don't like these. Okay, so Dawn of Sorrow was the first Castlevania on the DS. As well, it was released very early in the system's life, and as a result of that, the game ended up with the unfortunate curse of forced touchscreen gimmicks. Here's how it works. When you land the final hit on a boss, you are required to seal it away by drawing a symbol on the touchscreen. However, if you fail to draw it correctly, the boss regenerates a decent chunk of its health, and you're going to have to keep fighting it in order to try again. This is without a doubt one of the worst ideas the series has ever had. Imagine if you were playing Mario Kart, and right when you're about to cross the finish line, Lakitu drops down and asks you to play a rhythm game, and if you fail, you get sent backwards halfway across the track. That's pretty much what this is like. You're forced to do something that has nothing to do with the action you're in the middle of, and punished unfairly if you fail. It completely interrupts the flow of gameplay and adds nothing to the overall experience. It has to be one of the most unnecessary gameplay features that I've ever seen. Some of the later symbols can feel kind of wonky too. For some reason, it's not as simple as the game makes it look. There is nothing more infuriating than going through a long battle with death, only to get killed because you messed up drawing a line. The touchscreen was a new thing at the time. Everybody was pretty much forced to do something with it, so that they can make it a bullet point on the back of the box. But this could have been handled so much better. Why couldn't they have had the option to turn it off or something? Honestly, for as much as I love this game, if someone were to tell me that this was the worst one in the series because of this one mechanic, I can't say I wouldn't understand where they're coming from. Luckily, it appears that within the past year, fans have created patches for simplifying magic seals. Once applied, all you have to do is draw the first line, and the game will register it as being completed. I've messed around with this for a while, and I would most definitely recommend looking into it, whether you're new to the game or a longtime veteran. Touchscreen shenanigans aside though, the game actually does make good use of having two screens. While all of the action is happening on the bottom screen, the top screen can be switched between displaying the map or your stats. It's very simple, but it works. So as Soma makes his way through the castle, he finds Celia. It is here that we get introduced to two new characters, Dimitri and Dario. These two are potential candidates to become the successor to Dracula's power. They are both similar to Graham Jones from Aria of Sorrow, as they were also born at the same time of Dracula's death in 1999. Celia reveals that it was her plan all along to lure Soma to this castle, hoping to have Dimitri or Dario kill him and inherit his powers. Now let me just say that these two are some of the most boring and generic characters they could have come up with. Dimitri is the smug jerk that you just want to punch in the face whenever he opens his mouth, and Dario is just the dumb one. Even as boss fights, they're pretty underwhelming. Dimitri's gimmick is that he will copy any magic attack that is used on him. However, he can only have one at a time, so all you have to do is hit him with something that's easy for you to avoid, and then wail on him with your weapon. Just don't give him the une. When playing through the game again, I learned that you don't ever want to do that. As for Dario, well, I think this speaks for itself. Upon defeating Dimitri, he makes a wacky face, and it appears that Soma was somehow able to absorb his soul. Fast forward to the Dario fight, Celia interrupts and takes him away, not wanting to lose her last Dark Lord candidate. Now let's take a look at some of the other bosses throughout the game. One of my favorite things about Castlevania is the amount of variety it has with its enemies, and this definitely shows with most of its bosses too. Not only are they pretty cool to look at, but they're also well designed from a gameplay perspective. Every boss has patterns and will telegraph its attacks in some way. Despite the game having a strong focus on RPG elements, boss fights aren't just about having the bigger numbers to win. If you play smart, you can dodge every single thing that gets thrown your way, which is another reason I enjoy this series. Whether it be Metroidvania or Classicvania, for the most part, when you get hit, it feels like it was your own fault. Sure, the fight might still be pretty difficult, but you can still see that you could be doing something differently to avoid damage. That being said, Dawn of Sorrow is actually home to one of my least favorite bosses in the whole series, Gurgoth. Gurgoth is an absolutely annoying fight. He's huge, does a crap ton of damage, and you have to fight him in a tiny room. Also, he has this laser attack that will take up most of the screen and kill you in one hit. The only way to dodge it reliably is to crouch down really close to him like this. Like I said before, there are signs you need to look out for, and once you understand them, you can win easily if you play smart enough. But this boss is very unforgiving when you're first thrown into it. The first time I played this game, Gurgoth was one of the most frustrating parts for me. The magic seal mechanic did not help either. Another interesting mechanic in Dawn of Sorrow is Yoko's shop. In the starting location, you can find both Yoko and Hammer have set up shops. Hammer sells you general items, but Yoko does something much more useful. By using specific souls you've collected, she can enhance your normal weapons into stronger versions. I really like this idea, as it gives a use to souls that you no longer have a need for, or just wouldn't want to use at all. As well, it also allows you more freedom with your preferred weapon type. In Aria of Sorrow, there were different kinds of weapons, but because there was no way to enhance them, you pretty much just used whatever the strongest one that you picked up was. Now, I've heard people often criticize this feature by saying that it pads the game out and makes it ridiculously grindy, but I'd have to disagree. It's not forced and is completely optional. In fact, in my very first playthrough, I didn't even bother with it. Like I was saying before, this isn't a game where having bigger numbers wins everything for you. You can get through the game just fine without ever paying Yoko a visit. It's just something that you can go to do in order to upgrade your weapons if you so choose. So as Soma continues the chase after Celia, he crosses paths with Arikado. After being filled in on what's going on, he gives Soma a charm that Mina made for him. I don't know why she bothered, because as an equipped item, it really sucks. Anyways, after exploring through more of the castle and taking out more of the bosses, Soma reaches the long stairway at the top. In just about every other Castlevania game, this would be where the final battle against Dracula would take place. But instead, we find Dario. Wanting to ensure Dario's victory, Celia has summoned a powerful demon to enhance his abilities. There is actually a bit more to this fight than you might initially think. Upon defeating Dario, the game will finish with a bad ending. Celia escapes, and as Soma leaves the castle, he says that there is something wrong with him, implying that there was more for the player to resolve. What you are actually supposed to do is this. Before entering into the fight with Dario, you must first find and defeat the boss, Paranoia. Doing so will give you the ability to enter mirrors. I think you can tell where I'm going with this. As soon as you face off against Dario, use Paranoia to enter the real boss fight. Once that's taken care of, Celia wants you to meet her at the center of the castle. When you get there, you find that Mina is somehow here. Celia kills her, causing Soma to go berserk and give in to the darkness within him. He immediately kills Celia, to which she asks why. What do you mean why? You just killed his girlfriend. What the heck did you think was gonna happen? Here the game goes into another bad ending. Arikado and Julius stand at the entrance, wondering why Soma wasn't wearing that protective charm that Mina had made for him. The only way to make it through this scene without getting a bad end is to go into it wearing the useless charm you get about halfway into the game. The devs obviously knew that there was no way anybody would ever have it equipped by this point, so they just wanted to rub it in here. Look, Mina, I can appreciate the significant sentimental value that this thing represents, but that's not a stat in this game, so if it doesn't increase my strength, I don't want it. Once you equip the charm and try again, Soma is able to hang on just long enough for Arikado to arrive. He says that the Mina that was just killed was a fake, and helps him regain his senses. Here, Dimitri's soul exits Soma's body, using the fake's body to revive himself. Yeah, I don't know how that works either. When your universe involves magic, you can just do whatever you want sometimes. He informs Celia that after scanning the memories of Soma's past life, he knows of another way to create a new Dark Lord. From there, the two flee, and Soma and Arikado give chase into the final stretch of the game. The Abyss is an eerie place, and the visuals are really something else. Death himself even guards the entrance to it. It's not too hard to get through, but there is just one more boss to beat before we get to the final one, Abaddon. He sends swarms of locusts at you, and they can be a real pain to dodge. Luckily, there's a little trick you can do to save yourself some trouble. In the demon guest house area, if you manage to get the soul of one of the maids, you will get this vacuum cleaner attack that saps HP from enemies. And apparently, during this fight, it sucks up all of the locusts like they're nothing. A nice little touch from the developers. And then there's the final boss. Upon reaching the end, it is shown that Dimitri has killed Celia, and has attempted to gain the power of multiple demons. However, he's unable to maintain control, and all of that power becomes unleashed in the form of a monster. To be honest, it's not that difficult of a fight. This far into the game, you know what you're doing by now, and shouldn't have any trouble. And thankfully, you don't even need to finish the fight with a magic seal. Also, the room is made out of naked people. I just wanted to point that out because it's not something you see every day. With the threat destroyed, the castle crumbles into nothing, and the game comes to an end. But we're not done yet. Like all of the other Metroidvanias in the series, Dawn of Sorrow offers an additional mode to give the game even more replayability, Julius mode. This mode was also present in Aria of Sorrow. There were no cutscenes, and the player was able to roam the castle as Julius with all movement abilities available from the get-go. You could go wherever you'd like, defeating the game's bosses in whichever order you wanted. Most of the game's RPG elements were either removed or hidden from view. There was no menu to equip and use items like when playing as Soma, and there was also no leveling system. However, Julius did still have his own stats, and every time you defeated a boss and collected an orb, these unseen stats would increase. It's a pretty fun mode. The Julius mode for Dawn of Sorrow takes a much different approach. It actually takes place after the bad ending where Soma becomes the Dark Lord. Julius sets out knowing that he now has no choice but to defeat Soma, but this time he's got some friends that will join along the way. Yoko decides to tag along, and Arikado unleashes his power as Alucard to help out. This time, you can level up, and the three of them all share experience. You can switch between them freely just by hitting the X button. The whole mode is one big reference to Castlevania 3, and I love it. You've got Julius, who is the descendant of Trevor Belmont, Yoko, who is the descendant of Sypha, and Alucard, who is Alucard. All three of them play very differently and are fun to mess around with. In fact, this character switching mechanic would go on to be the inspiration for a lot of Portrait of Ruins gameplay. The music in the first area of the game is even replaced with a remix of the first level of Castlevania 3. Julius mode, like in the previous game, has you going around and fighting all of the now revived bosses. However, this time you actually can't reach the final area until you defeat all of them in the castle. Luckily, the developers made it so that you don't have to draw magic seals in this mode. Honestly, I'm convinced that by this point, even they hated their own mechanic. One of the biggest changes to this mode, however, was the final boss. Upon reaching the last room, the group has to fight Soma himself. In my opinion, this fight is much more difficult than the final boss of Soma mode. There isn't anything else at the end, just the group watching the castle fade away silently after having to kill their friend. A bit sad, but luckily this wasn't the canon ending. And that was Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow. Overall, I'd call it one of my favorite Castlevania games, and one of my favorite DS games. Sure, it definitely has a few issues, and its story isn't all that remarkable, but at the center of it all, its strong and well-polished gameplay is what holds it all together. Since discovering it for the first time a few years ago, I've played through it multiple times, and never find myself getting bored. I'd still even say that it's my favorite Castlevania game. I strongly recommend you try it out if you ever get the chance to play it. My name is Pikasprey, and thanks for watching.